right, 7:30 primetime kickoff in South Bend this weekend. We got two historical rivals going at it this weekend. Will not a SEC game, but definitely one of the best matchups in college football this weekend. Ranked on ranked, we got West Coast versus mid whatever they're in over there. But this is a huge test. We got Notre Dame and USC. USC traveling across two time zones to go
Mm.
back east after, flip flopping. They go from Illinois to Southern California, now back to South Bend. So, what does that travel do for them? But I'm looking forward to this game right now. 9.5 point favorites for Notre Dame. Over under set at 61.5 feels like that's a bigger number. How are you feeling about this game? Two big time brand names going at it this weekend for what feels like a playoff elimination game for the two of these teams.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way, especially for Notre Dame already sitting there at two losses. If you take a third loss, are you going to be able to make the playoff even though you're not in a conference? I feel like I can see a way because Notre Dame lost to Miami and Texas A&M in close games. Right now those teams are both in the top four. So if Miami and A&M keep it up, there might be a path for Notre Dame. But Notre Dame ain't thinking that. They're thinking we have a chance. We need a statement win. We can get one this Saturday against USC. Come into our building. It's a prime time game. Big opportunity. And I like Notre Dame in this spot. And you mentioned USC as well, traveling east across two time zones. We saw how that didn't work out so well against Illinois. And then I was just looking up here, in their first year in Big Ten play last year when they traveled east away from the West, they lost a lot of these games in Big Ten country on the road at Michigan, Minnesota, Maryland, Washington. Matter of fact, I don't think they won any games last year that were, in the central or eastern time zone. And then this year they've got a win against Purdue, but besides that, they've struggled when they have to make these long trips. So could travel, get to USC again. I could see it. I like Notre Dame. I like them in this spot.
Well, a lot of people in the preseason are really high on that Purdue team. Unfortunately, things haven't worked out very well for them. But
Yeah.
no, this Notre Dame team, I think a lot of the country sees Notre Dame and they really just remember the two losses, right? They feel like they do this every year, where they kind of lose some games early and then everybody stops talking about them, and then they just fly under the radar and just continue to beat up on teams. But yeah, a lot of people remember the Miami game losing, and then of course the A&M game. Do you realize that the last big game in South Bend, the losing team actually had 40 points in that football game against Texas A&M?
Mm.
So Notre Dame was able to score 40 points on A&M and still lose. What is the points total going to look like for Saturday night? Because USC comes in here with the number two offense in the entire country in yards per game, over 500 yards per game. And Jaden Mayala and Lincoln Riley have been on the same page all year long. It is looking really good. You have a stud receiver, probably the second best receiver in the country in Makai Lemon. Already 6 touchdowns for him. But man, this is a matchup where if you're USC, right, you have to prove it. This is your week to prove it, because last week you played Michigan and a lot of USC people were talking and they said this is our game to kind of make that statement. It's like, no, you don't make statements when you're a home favorite, right? Well, you make a statement when you cross two time zones and you're a 10-point underdog on the road in South Bend against a team that is physically better than you and a team that was put together by your new GM. So you know that this team has talent on this roster in Notre Dame, and a team that's playing extremely well. We talked about all the points that Notre Dame gave up in the first two games, over 40 points to Texas A&M. But do people realize that since that game, Notre Dame has only given up 27 total points, and
Mm.
that is something that I'm keeping my eye out on. We always talk about USC, and if they can bring that physicality, I think the matchup on paper here is Mike Denbrock's offense for Notre Dame and those amazing tailbacks in CJ Carr that they got at Notre Dame, and how they match up with D'Anton Lynn at USC and that defense, because we've seen that defense struggle a little bit in a game like Illinois, but we've also seen a team like Michigan go in there and they just out physical a team like Michigan, who's really bread and butter is to out physical and run the ball. And we saw USC almost flip the entire script on them last week, rushing for almost 300 yards against that Michigan defense. So I'm interested to see how this game plays out. I feel like there's so many wild cards in this game that can kind of flip this game on its ear. I like USC in this spot, honestly. I think USC has a lot to prove in this football game. I'm not saying USC probably goes in there and gets the win, but I could see a world where this is definitely a one possession, close game in the fourth quarter. Maybe Notre Dame kind of takes over there at the end, but I expect this game to have a lot of fireworks to it, Will.
Yeah, well, you look at USC, even in that loss to Illinois, they scored 32 points. They have not scored less than 30 points in a game yet this season. So USC's offense is doing some stuff. And then you mentioned Notre Dame as well. Like they've been blowing people out ever since that second loss they took to A&M. They've been blowing people out, and that defense, especially in the last few weeks, has not allowed much. Will they be able to do that against this USC offense that's been doing pretty good? I don't know. It might be foolish of me to be skeptical of that, but I think it's kind of believe it when I see it. I think just Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to shut them down. Did that make any kind of sense?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Okay, good.
from a USC perspective, I mean, you have to go into this game and you have to kind of start fast. I feel like if you want to kind of get the ball rolling on Saturday night and shock the world and get this upset and kind of prove that statement, you've almost got to bring that physicality. Now, last week they were able to run all over Michigan, and really, Notre Dame's front seven isn't as good as it was last year. They really are big in the secondary this year. They have two outstanding corners. Leonard Moore going to be one of the first cornerbacks taken in the draft. That's going to be a matchup to watch. That's box office stuff with Makai Lemon and Leonard Moore going at it over there on the outside. But Notre Dame plays a lot of man coverage, so they're going to be sending a lot of extra guys to try to stop the run. So USC is going to have the opportunity to have those one-on-one matchups with those talented receivers they got. It's really all about who can win those battles, because I feel like if USC can kind of get ahead in this game and put a little pressure on Notre Dame, it'll probably look a lot like that A&M game, where I feel like a lot of these teams are going to go back and forth scoring wise. You see that total at 61.5. That does not sound like a USC Notre Dame total that we've seen in the past, especially with Notre Dame and in recent years, how they've struggled offensively and really built that identity of playing really good defense and running the football. But Will, we haven't even talked about probably the two best players in this game. Well, I mean, we haven't talked about Jeremiah Love, who's one of the best running backs in the entire country, All American from last year for Notre Dame. And then CJ Carr's playing at an outstanding level right now, 13 touchdowns already this season. And I really think the hire of Marcus Freeman's tenure has been Mike Denbrock adding to this offense. We saw him Heisman Trophy winning quarterback at LSU with Jaden Daniels. They were able to fleece him away from LSU. We've seen LSU's offense take a dip since he's left, and we've seen Notre Dame's offense ascend. So that is a major hire for them. But this game is going to be won and losses and who can run the football. But it really feels like Notre Dame is going to be that X factor with Jeremiah Love and the talent they have in that running back room, that if they can establish a ground game and make this like one of those physical games, then it definitely bodes well for them. But if USC could turn this thing into a little bit of a shootout, I think they might have a chance on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I know we mentioned before that this is kind of like feels like a playoff game, sort of. Just looking at USC, I mean, if they win here, that's certainly big for them. They do have two more tough road tests after this at Nebraska, at Oregon. It kind of feels like a situation you just got to get two of those three, right? Two of those three, you're definitely in the playoffs, sitting at 10-2 there. And if you go into South Bend and find a way to win this weekend, I think USC is in great shape, and that's something Lincoln Riley needs. He's been certainly not meeting expectations people have when they hired him there several years ago now, and if he can get them to the playoff this year, that'll really have things going in the right direction for his perception or the perception of him there at USC.
Yeah, certainly a lot on the line on Saturday night in South Bend.